Hey everyone, Rob here. One of the bigger, jobs before getting this thing on the track, I completed it just yesterday, and that's bleeding the brakes. I had the rear brakes off because the whole rear suspension came off for the engine change, and the clutch line was off as well. So anyways, I had to bleed some systems. So now the brakes are back together. So why not talk about brakes? What's the best way to look at this? Well, not exactly from a driver's point of view. Let me see if I can get a camera in here and you can see down into the footwell from the driver's point of view. All right, lighting could be better, but whatever. There's the throttle, anti-skid tape attached to it. There's a brake pedal. It is on both sides of the steering shaft so that you can left foot brake if you want. There's the clutch. And the frame is so narrow, there is no dead pedal. There is no room to put your feet anywhere. But honestly, dead pedals are handy if you have space. But, I'm strapped so tightly into this thing that there's no need for it there. It's not like you're bracing yourself with the dead pedal. Okay. So looking a little more carefully vertically here, we have our brake pedal in the middle. So now we're going to be facing aft. Looking down, we have 3 master cylinders. This one's a different color because I replaced it. This one is for the rear brakes. There's a single line coming off of it. Goes to the back of the car, we'll see that, and does the rear brakes. The center one does the front brakes. There are 2 lines coming off of this. A little tricky to see, but there they are. Right there. And one underneath it. And then the third one is the clutch, hydraulic clutch on this car. So a front master cylinder and a rear master cylinder, which allows a couple of things. One, safety-wise, you can only lose half of your brakes should one system fail. But what it allows, actually you can see here, I'll hold the phone like this. This is the brake pedal. It's hinged on the floor. So this is the brake pedal here, and we have these 2 fittings, for lack of a better word, going into the threaded push rods that are going to push the cylinders in. There is a cable running here. A little hard to see. I'm going to change the angle in a second. Okay, let's go over the frame. Here we go. So where's my finger? There we are. So this is a brake balance bar. Brake balance is how much front brake is it set up for compared to the rear brake. You want more front braking than rear, not by a massive amount, but you want more brake pressure on the fronts than the rear. Now this can be adjusted by loosening these jam nuts and turning these rods. Then fine-tuning, in other words, on the track, this cable goes to a hand wheel on the instrument panel. I'll show you that in a bit. But at any rate, when we're applying the brakes, each one of these push rods can push on its own master cylinder with a different amount of force. By turning the handle, you're basically sliding this piece back and forth and adjusting how much brake pressure you get. The brakes on these things are like super rock solid. Manual brakes, no power brakes, just foot power, that's it. The braided lines, they're actually nylon lines inside, little small -3 3/16 of an inch nylon lines with a braided covering. The actual brake pressure inside these lines is not very high. Okay, so right front suspension, there's a brake line coming out, tie wrapped to the lower control arm, comes up and into the caliper. This car, these calipers are custom made for the car. piston here, brake pads in the middle. These cotter pins are holding the brake pads in so they can be, very quickly slid out and new pads put in. I go through 2 sets of brake pads every season, and way too much money for brake pads for what they are. Okay, so those are the front brakes, and then the rear brakes, one of the brake lines, which one are we talking about here? This one comes down. Anyways, there's a connection here. We go back to here. This is a T-junction, a T-fitting where the brake line comes in, splits off left and right. And then these control arms have little brackets welded to them, so you can tie wrap the brake lines on. And identical calipers in the rear. Same size calipers, rotors, brake pads, identical front and rear. Left-hand line off to the left rear caliper. No ABS, no anti-lock brakes, nothing electronic, no power assist, just stomp on the pedal, right? Nice and simple, very firm pedal. Lots of these cars have special, fancy, lightweight drilled and slotted brake rotors, and I'd love to have a set just because they look really pretty. This car was designed around some Volkswagen parts, very limited, being brake rotors from a Golf, with the brake rotors, brand new ones, and then you have to machine them down quite a few millimeters so they're thin enough to fit. The wheel bearings are Volkswagen Golf in the front and the rear. And the CV joints, again, on the rear, the CV joints are Volkswagen Golf and Golf wheel bearings, which means finding replacements is, relatively cheap and easy. The drive shafts are custom made, but, these parts are readily available anywhere, which is kind of nice. Let's have a look at the brake balance adjustment. So maybe we'll do steering too. Right, so there's our steering wheel. Brace this. There's the fire handle we talked about in the previous video. Right above it here, Wilwood. You come in close, it's labeled front and rear, and this has detents. So as you turn it, it clicks and locks into place, and you can rotate this a number of turns, and that will adjust to give you more brakes to the rear, or turn it clockwise, more brakes to the front. And you're going to judge this based on which wheels are locking up. I mean, I can set this up in the garage, and that's how most people do it. But if you find there's an issue on track, you can always quickly adjust it with this balance system. Speaking of steering, why not just a slightly longer video, because it's not much of a video for steering itself. There's the steering shaft with a spline on it and a quick release. Here's the steering wheel. Not a single button or readout or drinks button or switch. I don't know what it costs, but I tell you, it's a heck of a lot simpler than a Formula One. No paddle shifters, just a quick release mechanism here. Hold on. Right, that piece. Makes it easier to get in and out of the car for sure. There we go. Steel shaft, steel shaft, steel shaft. This particular car has, somewhere around here, there we go, a bolt through it. So it's one steel shaft inside a larger one. And so to adjust for people with shorter arms or longer arms, or different sized people, the shaft can be made longer or shorter. I've got it as far forward as it will go because that just fits for me. And once you got your hands in there in a pair of gloves, yeah, there's not a lot of room. It goes into the steering mechanism at this point. Right, so there's our steering arm. And I'm gonna have to go around the other side of the car for this. Rack and pinion steering, no power, of course, no need. The steering is actually quite light. So there's the steering centered. How many turns full lock? I honestly don't know, but I believe it's half a turn and a bit. So there's half a turn. Yeah, so roughly 3/4 of a turn from centered to full right lock. I mean, out on the racetrack, maybe half, well, honestly, I'd have to look at videos, maybe half a turn. 90 degrees. 90 degrees is about as far as I think I've ever gone. So a complete lock to lock would be 1 1.25, 1.5, something like that. The steering's pretty light even with the vehicle stopped, and once you're rolling, the steering is really nice and light. So this is another custom-made steering rack. Shaft comes down, and it's just a plain old mechanical rack and pinion. Bolted to the forward frame with these brackets. Grease fitting on top to grease it. It's something I've been meaning to do this year. And then these are not hollow, these are solid aluminum rods with left hand and right hand threads on them. So that's a left hand thread. Threads are going the wrong way. And that's a left hand thread. And the idea behind this is you loosen the jam nut, and by rotating this arm either one way or the other way, you make it longer and shorter. And that then is going to give you toe out or toe in. So I'll have to do another video on suspension setup and adjustment, but these suspensions are adjustable in every possible way. I shouldn't have to do any setup for this year, but fairly soon I'll get it down and on the weigh scales and do some measuring to make sure everything's still pointing in the right direction. So there you go, steering and brakes. That's why they say these cars are like some pure racing, some pure driving. No traction control, no stability control, no anti-skid brakes, no power steering, no power brakes. You know, a clutch, a manual transmission, and the driver makes the difference. Okay, I think that was a good video. We'll talk to you later.